It was a gray, cold Thursday afternoon, the kind that makes you want to wrap yourself in a blanket and stay home with a good book. The library was almost empty, just the way I liked it. A soft hum from the heating vents filled the air, and now and then, the clock above the entrance would tick loud enough to remind me time was still moving. I was shelving a stack of returned books when I heard the door creak open. A gust of chilly wind swept in, and I shivered, even though I was wearing my thickest sweater. When I looked up, I saw him. A small boy, maybe 8 or 9 years old, standing in the doorway. His clothes were too thin for the weather, and his cheeks were red from the cold. He clutched something close to his chest, a worn backpack that looked like it had seen better days. At first, he just stood there, half in, half out of the library, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to come in. I put the books down and smiled as warmly as I could. "Hey there," I said, keeping my voice soft so I wouldn't scare him. "Come on in. It's warmer inside." He hesitated for a moment longer, then stepped inside. He didn't say a word, just nodded, shyly. I watched as he hugged his backpack tighter and rubbed his arms. His whole body was trembling. "Are you okay?" I asked gently. He nodded again, but it was the kind of nod that kids give when they don't want to admit they're not okay. I walked over to the small reading nook in the corner, the one with the beanbags and the old but cozy couch. "Why don't you sit here? I'll get you something warm." He followed me without a word and curled up on the couch like a little kitten. I hurried to the staff room and grabbed the emergency blanket we kept for power outages. When I wrapped it around him, he whispered, "Thank you." So quietly I almost missed it. "No problem," I said, trying not to sound too worried. "My name's Miss Lane. What's yours?" He looked down at his hands and mumbled, "Eli." "Nice to meet you, Eli," I said. "Are you here by yourself?" He nodded, his big brown eyes darting around like he was scared someone was going to take him away. I didn't want to push him. I just sat down across from him and started reading a book out loud. Nothing fancy, just one of those adventure stories with pirates and hidden treasure. I figured if I acted normal, maybe he'd feel normal too. After a few minutes, I noticed Eli starting to relax. He pulled the blanket tighter around himself and even smiled a little when the pirate captain made a joke. It was a small smile, but it was real. We stayed like that for a while, me reading, him listening. The sun dipped lower and the shadows stretched long across the carpet. I should have been thinking about closing up soon, but something told me I couldn't just send him back out into the cold. When I closed the book, Eli looked up at me, his face serious. "Do you live here?" he asked. I laughed a little. "Feels like it sometimes. But no, I have a little apartment a few blocks away." He nodded, like he was filing that information away for later. Then he asked, "Do you have food?" My heart broke a little right then and there. "Yeah, I have some snacks." "Are you hungry?" He nodded, and this time he didn't try to pretend otherwise. I went back to the staff room and rummaged through my bag. I always kept some granola bars and fruit in there. I grabbed a banana and a chocolate chip granola bar and brought them out. Eli ate like he hadn't seen food in days. I didn't ask questions. Not yet. When he finished, he wiped his mouth with the back of his sleeve and looked at me, really looked at me like he was trying to figure out if he could trust me. "Thank you," he said again, a little stronger this time. "You're welcome," I said. "You can stay here until we figure something out, okay?" His eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them away fast. He nodded and leaned back into the couch, the blanket wrapped tightly around him. I went to my desk and called the non-emergency police line. I told them there was a child here who needed help, but I was careful with my words. I didn't want Eli to panic. The dispatcher promised to send someone kind and patient. While we waited, I read more stories. Eli even laughed a few times. It felt like we were in our own little world, safe and warm while the cold howled outside. About 20 minutes later, Officer Reynolds arrived. He was one of the good ones, an older man with a kind face and a slow, gentle way of talking. He knelt down next to Eli and introduced himself like he was meeting a new neighbor, not questioning a scared child. Eli clutched my hand when Officer Reynolds asked if he could come with him. "I don't want to go to a bad place," Eli whispered. "You won't?" I promised, even though part of me knew I couldn't guarantee that. I squeezed his hand. "They're just going to make sure you're safe." After a few more quiet reassurances, Eli finally agreed. He stood up, still wrapped in the blanket, and gave me a hug so tight it knocked the air out of me. "Thank you, Miss Lane," he said into my sweater. "You're the nicest person I ever met." I blinked back tears and patted his back. "You're gonna be okay, Eli, I promise." And then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind them, and the library felt too quiet, too empty. I worried about him for days, weeks really. I asked around but couldn't get much information. I told myself that maybe no news was good news. Maybe he was somewhere warm, with real meals and someone to tuck him in at night. I had to believe that. Life at the library went on. Kids came and went, books were borrowed and returned, and the seasons changed. But I never forgot about Eli. Then, almost a year later, it happened. It was a bright Saturday afternoon, the library buzzing with kids for story hour. I was helping a little girl find a book about dinosaurs when I heard someone call my name. "Miss Lane." I turned around, and there he was, Eli. Only he wasn't the same shivering boy who had stumbled through the door that cold day. He was clean, his hair neatly combed, wearing a new jacket that fit him properly. His smile was big and bright, and he looked happy. I knelt down and he ran into my arms just like before. "I found you," he said, laughing. "I told them I had to find you." Behind him stood a man and a woman, smiling warmly. His foster parents. They came over and introduced themselves. They told me how Eli had been placed with them a few days after the night I found him. How he had told them about the nice librarian who had taken care of him. "You made him feel safe when he needed it most," his foster mom said, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave him hope." I couldn't speak. I just hugged Eli tighter. Later, they explained a little more. Eli had been missing for weeks before he showed up at the library. His mother, who had struggled with addiction, had left him with someone who wasn't safe. He had run away, surviving on scraps, sleeping in alleyways. And here's the thing. Eli wasn't just any child. His grandfather, who had been searching for him, was a famous musician. Someone I'd heard on the radio without even realizing it. Eli's story had been all over the news, but without his last name or anyone to connect the dots, he had just been another lost child. until he found his way to my little library. I hugged him one more time, feeling a lump in my throat. It didn't matter who his family was. To me, he was just Eli, the brave little boy who had walked into my life on a cold, gray afternoon and changed it forever.